Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. I'm so glad you're here. Ever since I was a little girl, I have always loved advent calendars. And the ones I had when I was a child, they were just the sort where you opened up a little paper door and you got a little picture, not even necessarily a great picture, but they were so much fun. And I especially loved the ones that just had beautiful art or that I could play with my little play school people. So last year I made an advent calendar out of wood, and it was a little bit challenging, but it was so much fun, and I thought I would try to make an advent calendar again this year, and I thought I'd try to do something that is hopefully a little bit simpler. So let's go have some fun. To start, we're going to make the triptych with the bookcases attached. The top of the bookcase is this wood tray from the Dollar Tree. So it's going to have some sort of design on the ends. Doesn't matter what design, we're going to fill that in. And I'm going to put 3 shelves in each bookcase. I'm going to make the shelves out of this thin wood that I bought at Amazon, and I'll include a link in the description. But once we get to making the books, you'll see that I make larger pieces of wood out of the large craft sticks. So you could try that for the shelves if you don't want to buy these little thin pieces of wood from Amazon. So I just measured the box for the width and cut my pieces of wood, and then measured the box for the depth and cut the pieces of wood to the appropriate depth using my box cutter knife. I then cut thin strips of the wood the same length as the shelf to support the shelf underneath, and then smaller strips of wood to support the shelf on the sides. And I made those strips a little bit short so that they would not extend all the way to the front of the bookcase. I then divided the bookcase into 3 even pieces, and I laid out the strips below where the shelves would be for those even pieces and glued them in with wood glue. Once that had dried, I laid the shelves on the strips and glued them down with wood glue. Now, this wood that I have from Amazon, it is very thin, and some of the pieces had warped a little bit. So I am steaming the pieces with some steam from some boiling water, and then bending them with my hands to get them to be a little bit more flat before I glue them in. I then cut strips of wood to put at the top of the bookcase, because we are going to fill in that shape at the top. In my bookcases, those are stars, but it will be easier to fill in if we have something to press the wood filler against. We do not need to do this for the bottom, because the bottom of the bookcase is going to be on top of our crates. And I just glued those in with wood glue. To fill in the holes on the top of the bookcase, I just used this lightweight spackle, which I did purchase at the Dollar Tree. Now, the triptych is going to be made from these wall shelves from the Dollar Tree, and I am just going to set aside the hanging part and use just the shelves. Now, I'm going to use 3 of these. Initially, I thought I might use a different piece of wood in the middle, but because of the thickness, it made more sense to use 3 of these shelves. Also, a different piece of wood might not stain the same as the shelves. Now, the shelves have holes on either end, and what I'm going to do is cut off the ends of the shelves so that there are no holes. And I'm just going to cut all 3 shelves so they're exactly the same size. My shelves are 11 3/8 inches long or high. I decided on that height just based on how much space I needed for the crate
with the little bookcase on top. So if you are doing this with different size pieces, you might want to cut your shelves to a different height. But that was about as much height as I could get out of the shelves and remove the holes. You'll notice that the holes aren't in exactly the same place for all of the shelves. Now for the bottom part of the bookcase, I'm going to use the wood crates from the Dollar Tree. And this will make a cabinet under the bookcase. So one cabinet I want to split into two pieces, and the other cabinet I want to leave big. So that's going to be for the final day of the calendar. For my calendar, I made it a 12-day calendar, but I believe that there is enough room in the bookcase for you to make a 24-day calendar if you want to. So I just cut another one of those pieces of wood to bisect one of the crates and glued it in with wood glue. I then cut doors for the crates, and you can see on the video here that I have put a little piece of wood across the crate that doesn't have the piece of wood bisecting it, and I planned on putting the doors on the outside and having them just rest on that piece of wood. I had not gotten the hinges yet when I did this, and the hinges were very tiny, and I ended up not using this design, but you will see later that I scaled down these doors, so I wouldn't cut the doors yet. I then glued the crates and the bookcases to the hanging shelves and used wood glue. Now I'm gluing them on while they're lying down, but I then stood them up on a level surface so that they would dry level. And I glued it all together before I painted it because at this time I believed I was going to paint the whole thing white, but ultimately I decided not to do this. And the crates are not a perfect fit across the shelves, so I just decided that there would be a little bit of extra space on the outside, and I was just consistent with how much space I left around them. Once I had the bookcase glued to the crate and it had all dried, I again used the spackle to fill in that star on the other end of the bookcase. And once all of that had dried, I stained the wood with a mixture of apple barrel, burnt umber, acrylic paint, and water. And I did several coats of this. I started out light, and I just kept adding coats until I was happy with the color. And I stained both sides and the edges, of course. I then painted the bookcases and the crates with Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint in white Adirondack. Now I thought that I would stencil the numbers on the doors before I assembled this because I thought it would be easier, and I used my Cricut to cut out these stencils. I chose 12, 7, and 5 as the numbers that would be on the doors. I made the image in Photoshop. The font is Baskerville, and then I put it into a Cricut Design Space and had the Cricut cut them out. But this is just cardstock, and the stenciling went very, very badly. But I'm sure you know how to stencil or put stickers on or just paint freehand. I ended up painting the numbers mostly freehand, sort of painting them through my cardstock stencils. And these just needed a lot of touch-up because I messed it up so badly, but I think they ended up okay. Now, to make the doors for the cabinets, I bought this little piece of wood at Home Depot. They have a section in the molding section, which is like tiny pieces of molding. And so I bought this piece. It's 3 feet long, and I think it's 1/4 inch wide. And I bought this to line the inside of the little cabinets so that I could hinge the doors inside these pieces. So you can see what I'm doing. I measured and cut the little pieces so I could basically make a little frame inside each little cabinet, and that's recessed a little bit so that I can fit the door in on top of it. And I glued that in with wood glue. And then I trimmed my doors down to size because previously, as I said, I thought they were going to fit over the cabinets. Now the hardware of the little tiny hinges that I bought for these cabinet doors, and I bought those on Amazon, and I'll include a link, that hardware was still too deep to go through these doors. So I added just a little thin piece on the edge of each door where the hinge is going to be, so it would be thick enough to accommodate the little tiny nails that are in the hinges. And once I had all the doors ready, I measured and put the little tiny hinges on, and the little tiny nails that go into the hinges, I just pressed them into the wood. In one place, they split the wood, and I glued it with wood glue, and it is holding together just fine now that it's glued. The doors also have warped a little bit. This wood is so thin. I think that it would have been better to use a thicker wood for these doors. And in the future, the next time I make an advent calendar, I am going to use thicker wood for the doors, if I do doors like this. Now, if you are not interested in doing doors, I say just put little baskets in the little cabinet under the bookcase. You don't have to have doors. I'm not sure that they actually look that nice. I think baskets could possibly look a lot nicer. Now, this advent calendar will fold up, but it won't fold up if I put knobs on these little doors. So what I want to do is put removable knobs on the doors so that we can have the knobs on the door, but when we want to put the advent calendar away, it will be easy to remove the knobs and just put them inside the little cabinets. So for knobs, I'm just going to use these little brown beads, but the way I'm going to attach them to the doors is with these brass fasteners. And you can get these at Amazon or Staples, but these are extra long ones because the regular size ones I felt weren't quite long enough. So then what I do is simply drill holes that are large enough for those brass fasteners to go through, and then I can just push it through the hole and then open it up on the other side. And when I want to remove it, just close it up and pull it back through the hole. They work really well. I didn't like the little gold accent on the knobs though. Maybe it looks okay, maybe you would like that, but I wanted the knobs to be brown, so I painted them with the burnt umber paint and then just sealed them with Mod Podge. And I didn't like the way they stuck out from the bead, so I did drill a hole at the top of the bead, a very wide one, but I didn't go in very far, so that they would be a little bit more recessed into the top of the bead. Now, to attach the 3 shelves together, which makes my triptych, I bought some hinges at Ace Hardware, and what I bought was 2 2-packs of shutter hinges, 1.5 inches, and they're brass color. But the screws that came with them were too long. So I bought some smaller screws. I managed to find some 1/4 inch screws, but they were too small. The head size was too small. So I was really glad I got all of those paper fasteners, because what I ended up doing was cutting off the little legs, which gave me basically a little brass button, and then I drilled a hole in the little brass button, and that gave me a sort of washer that I could use so that the little tiny screws didn't go through the hinges. There was a lot of weird problem solving with this project. I'm sure people who make miniatures have already solved all of these problems, but, well, I did the best I could with what I had. So I found it easiest to attach the hinges by folding everything up, or sort of putting everything in the configuration it would be in when it was folded up, and then putting the hinges on the outside and doing like kitty corner screws and then filling in with the other screws. And now that the whole thing is painted and screwed together, I am going to give it a coat of matte Mod Podge to seal it. And that's just going to go over everything except for, of course, the hardware. So the wood and the insides of the cabinets, the shelves, everything. Now I've been trying to clean out my craft room, and I found these little tiny wooden spools, and I thought that those would be really cute candle holders. So for each candle holder, I made 2 at this point for the bookcases. I took a bamboo skewer and stuck it in the little tiny spool. It was the perfect size, and then just cut it off at what I thought was a good candle height. And now I have those legs left over from all of the paper fasteners that I used as washers for my hinges. So what I did was I took a knife and cut down the center at the top of the bamboo skewer and glued in the top of one of those little legs because they're pointy at the top, so it looked like a flame. And then I used the wood glue to make drips down the outside of the bamboo skewer to look like a candle. Once the candlesticks had dried, I painted them with my Adirondack white paint, but with a little bit of pale daffodil mixed in to make it look a little bit more off-white and waxy. And I painted the candle in that color, and I painted the little candle holder with my burnt umber, and then I Mod Podged the entire thing to seal it. Now I have this little bit of greenery that came off a garland that I have, and so I decided to cut some pieces off of that and use some green floral wire to wire it together just to make a spray for the front of each of my candles. Now, my idea with this advent calendar is that we all have books that we love, holiday books or other books, just books that we love, and it would be so much fun to have each day of the advent be one of the books that you love. And the great thing about this is you can change it every year if you want to. So it can always be a surprise what number is what book. So these books can be made out of cardboard, certainly. I thought I would like to make them out of wood, and I thought it would be fun if we could make them out of popsicle sticks or craft sticks, because that's something that you can easily obtain. You can get them at the Dollar Tree. So I thought I would see how well we could do with craft stick books. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to make the craft sticks into a larger piece of wood. So I'm going to take 3 craft sticks, and I'm going to put wood glue on the thin, long edge of one of the craft sticks and glue 2 other craft sticks to it. And I'm going to lay it down on pieces of masking tape where they join together. And then once it's all joined together, wrap masking tape around it to hold it tight. Now your craft sticks, they're going to be different shapes, and they might be a little bit warped. So you want to try to pick ones that fit well together all along the length. So I measured my bookcase to figure out how tall I could make my books. And on the bottom shelf, you can make them deeper because you have that crate underneath. You can even make them deeper for the taller shelves too if you want to. They'll just stick out a little bit. So I take my piece of wood, which I've made out of my 3 craft sticks, and I cut off the rounded ends. Now I ended up using some of these rounded ends later on, so you might want to hold on to them. I then cut 2 pieces, and those are going to be the front and the back cover, basically, of the book. Now, these particular craft sticks, they weren't very straight, and so they're not holding together very well. So what I decided to do was to cut some cardboard, and you can see this is just a cereal box, and glue that to what is going to be the inside of the book. So it's not quite as large as the book cover, so it doesn't stick out at the end. And you can face the printed part of that to the outside because we're going to be covering these books. So with those reinforced, I then cut a single craft stick to be the spine of the book and the top and the bottom. And this part is the part that's maybe the trickiest. I would say let the glue start to dry and get sticky before you try to put the pages basically and the spine of the book in, because you're basically making a sort of a sandwich here but with nothing in the middle, and it's going to be wobbly. But after you do a couple of them, you will get the hang of it. And I then just taped it and taped it and taped it to hold it together while it dried. Now, I made 9 books in different sizes, so some smaller ones for the upper shelves and some larger ones for the lower shelves. So for some of them I only glued 2 craft sticks together, and for others I glued 3 craft sticks together. And initially I thought I would paint them completely with the burnt umber. So initially I painted each book inside and out entirely with the burnt umber. But here's what you should do if you want to make this project. First of all, sand these as best you can. The craft sticks are not good wood and they are difficult to sand, and they're going to be even more difficult to paint if you don't sand them well. But then use the spackle and smooth them wherever you have a raw edge. So after I went through all this, after I painted them, I came back with the spackle and I spackled over everything that was rough, every crack, every hole, and it was so much easier to then paint over that. What I did end up doing was leaving a few of the books brown and painting the rest of them with the Adirondack white paint. I just felt like the brown was just too dark for what I wanted. However, I did leave them brown on the inside. Now for the pages at the top and the bottom, what I did was I mixed up some Adirondack white with the pale daffodil to get a yellowish color, and I painted that over the brown. And if the brown is still a little bit damp when you do this, that actually is going to make it look a little bit better if you end up dragging a little bit of the brown through the paint. I then took a toothpick and I dragged lines through the white, revealing the brown underneath to look like pages. And once that had dried, I made a wash with the brown paint. So mostly water, a little bit of brown paint, and I just washed that over the pages to dull down that yellow color a little bit. Now right now all of my books are brown, and I left the middle of the book unpainted because I figured I'd be gluing to that part of the book. And what I'm going to glue is some fabric. So I want to give each book sort of a fabric cover, and then I'm going to glue a picture of a favorite book cover over that. And these are just some fat quarters that I have from the Dollar Tree and one that I got at Joann's, the patterned one. And I'm just cutting those a little bit longer and about the same width as the books, and then folding over the edges and using Mod Podge to glue them down, and then covering over the whole thing with Mod Podge. I chose a red color, a teal color, and then a sort of yellowish and brown pattern, which is the piece from Joann's. Now I painted numbers on the spines of the book with gold paint, and I did make little stencils for myself, but I just painted through the stencils. This is the same font, Baskerville. And I decided to paint those in gold. So for the patterned books, I really had to paint in white and then paint the gold over the white. Now I'm trying to learn how to use my Cricut, so I thought I'd try this print and cut feature for the little book covers. So I just picked covers that are of books that my family loves, and I printed them out, cut them out with my Cricut, and then just glued them to the fronts of the books. So I did scale each one to match a specific book, since my books were all different sizes. And I just Mod Podged them on and then sealed them with Mod Podge. Now initially I was going to put a tree between the two bookcases, and I made a tree and I didn't like it, so I decided to go with a fireplace. Now this is a wood box from the Dollar Tree, and I think it's going to make a perfect fireplace. So the first thing I did was I cut out an opening in the bottom of the box to be the opening of the fireplace. Now I was very, very careful to cut that out in one piece because I am going to reuse that wood. That wood is quite thin. Now I have these little wood square blocks from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to glue those on the inside. And I think these are really fun. They make it look sort of like bricks on the inside. So I glued those on the sides and on the top. And I gave everything a good sand. Now that piece that I cut out of the bottom of the box, I cut it into strips and I made little wood frames that I'm going to attach images to that are going to be the images inside the fireplace. So I was able to make 2 little wood frames out of what was left of the middle. And I think that you could use wooden coffee stirrers for this. You certainly could use cardboard for it. And I just made little, as I said, rectangular frames that would fit behind those wood blocks. Now, those little wood frames are going to drop down from the top. So I need to cut a sort of a slot in the top that is behind those little wood blocks. So I measured where that was, and I cut the slot. The slot is about, I think, a half a centimeter wide. You want to make it wide enough to accommodate the frame. And mine really isn't wide enough. It could be just a tiny bit wider because the frames are a little bit hard to pull in and out sometimes. This wood on the side of the box, which is the top of our fireplace, is actually quite a bit thicker than the bottom of the box, so it took me a long time to cut through that. Now, as I mentioned before, Home Depot has a section in the molding section which has tiny trim, and I found a nice little piece of crown molding there, and I cut that to go around the top of the fireplace. So I used my little tiny miter box and saw, which I just love, to miter that at the edges, and then I glued that on with wood glue and then used the spackle to fill in any little gaps. And now remember those leftover pieces of the books, the craft sticks that are stuck together. I took a couple of those and attached them to the tops of my frames. So you can see how that's going to work. There is sort of a little handle that will allow us to put the frame in and out of that slot. Now the other piece of wood from Home Depot, this is the one that I used to make the frames inside the cabinet so that I could inlay the doors. I'm going to use this to make a slot for the little frame that is going to have our image on it to go into. And then I want to put a piece of plastic in the back there so that when we put lights in, they don't press up against the image. So I'm just cutting that wood to size and then gluing it inside the fireplace so that there's a channel right under that hole in the top where our little frames are going to slide in. And I just found an image of a fire on the internet and an image of Santa's feet, and I sort of put those together, and I'm going to glue those to the frames with wood glue. And this is just the plastic top of a tin foil sort of lasagna pan, and I'm just going to cut a piece the appropriate size so that I can stick it in the back of the fireplace. Again, this is so the lights won't press up against our image. Now the entire fireplace, inside and out, is being painted with Adirondack white. And I cut another piece of that wood trim that's going to conceal that slot on the fireplace a little bit. So I cut it long enough to conceal the slot, and it will be in front of it. I did buy 2 pieces of that wood. I don't think 1 piece would have been enough for this entire project. So I'm going to put a piece of tape down over the top of the fireplace to protect it, and then I'm going to glue that piece of wood to the 2 craft sticks that are still sticking up with wood glue and let that dry. And then I just made 3 more little candles for the top of this one. This is the one that is the fire. I used hot glue to glue that piece of plastic inside, and that works well with these little fairy lights. It's 10 fairy lights, which I got at the Dollar Tree. If you don't put the plastic in and they press up against the piece of paper, it just looks funny. Then I glued my little candles with wood glue to the piece of wood, which is the candelabra, and I did cut off the craft sticks so that they wouldn't stick up above the piece of wood. Now I painted the candlesticks brown, again the candles, the Adirondack white, and I painted the whole little shelf brown and below it just in case that was visible. I then added some gold around the edges of the candlesticks because I felt they were just a little too dull. Now I'm going to make a picture frame to go above the fireplace. The picture frame is going to have 3 sides, and I've cut the thick craft sticks in half, and I'm going to double them up to give us some depth. And this is so that we can slide an image in. I'm then going to put a thicker frame on 4 sides on top of this. The thicker frame is going to be made from the craft sticks, but not cut in half, and that will be mitered. And then I will cut some pieces of the trim that I put around the top of the fireplace and put that on the inside of this. So first I am gluing that frame together and then gluing the double thick pieces to the back of that. This gives it some depth. It will hold it away from the wall and will allow us to slide an image in. Now the frame got a coat of Adirondack white, and then I used wood glue to glue it to the triptych in the middle over the fireplace, being very careful to make sure the opening is at the top. I then did some more Mod Podge over everything. And finally, for the Santa Claus image, I wanted to do something different on top of the fireplace, so I made the holder in the same way. But then I thought I would make something that looks like presents, so I glued together 2 of the little blocks and 2 tumbling tower blocks to make a tall present and a long present, and I glued them to the piece of wood. That didn't seem like quite enough, so I took some beads in 2 small sizes, filled in the holes with spackle, and then glued those around the presents. I painted the piece of wood white, I painted the presents green and red, and I painted the balls gold. I then have this very thin wired gold ribbon that I used to put ribbons on the presents. I used wood glue for one, and it worked, but it was difficult to do. I used hot glue for the other, and that was much easier to do. And I made little bows for the top of them, and I did hot glue both bows on. I then took a bamboo skewer and just twirled the little ribbons around the bamboo skewer to make them twirly. So here it is, and first of all, let's look at how you can put a picture in the picture frame. I have a little snowman here, but the picture that you choose can really change the feeling of the whole piece. And what I have here is just pieces of Christmas cards and gift tags that I thought were pretty. And you can see how each one has sort of a different feel and could give a different feel to this project. And you just slide that in through the top. Now I have some candy here, and I'm just going to put some candy in the little cabinets and slide some candy into the books. With the fireplace, I have these fairy lights, which I got at the Dollar Tree. They take 2 AA batteries, and there's 10 fairy lights, and they fit very nicely just right into the back of the fireplace up against that piece of plastic. So I'm turning those on, and then picking one of the pieces to slide in. I've picked the one with the logs here. We can pull that out and put the Santa boots and presents in.
So what did you think of our little bookcase advent calendar? It was really fun to make and fun to customize, and I think that it would be really fun for you to make because you can customize not only the little book covers, but also you can make as many of the little fireplace inserts as you want to and customize the images and what you put on top. I think that's going to make it fun for a child to play with as well, because they can change out the fireplace inserts and they can change out the picture in the picture frame. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.